I would like to invite my friend Omar. I think Omar, all right, Omar is here. Thank you very much, Omar, to join us. And I know that we have some guests. And Omar, I was saying that in this session, we're going to discuss about affordability and accessibility of energy. So the floor is yours, Omar, with your guests.
Fantastic, Prof. Great to see you there, as always. You said it's the last panel, but obviously the best panel because we've got the best panelists of the day. So I know you did that deliberately and that you kept the best people for the last panel so people go home with a great taste and a great idea of the Brazil-Africa Forum. But it's great to be connected with all of you. I've got some very interesting people for this last panel and quite diverse in terms of sectors, in terms of the work that they do. So hopefully we'll have different perspective, different opinions. So there's a saying that says to every complex problem, there's a simple wrong answer. So Prof said that the energy problem is a simple one. But we seem to have many complex wrong answers by the looks of it if we can't manage to get electricity to everyone. But I think it's actually a complex issue. There's lots of different dynamics at play. There's also the dynamic of climate change today that's extremely important, which means that developing markets such as those of Brazil and across the continent of Africa, they need to be able to have accessible and affordable energy, but we also need to do it in a way that's not going to compromise the environment. So we need to do it in a sustainable manner. So we've got Pearce-Oroz, who's the Director of International Relations and Special Projects at the UN established organization Sustainable Energy for All. So Glenn, it's great to have you on board. I was actually there at the launch of this particular initiative when Dr. Kande Junkela, I think, was asked by Ban Ki-moon at the time to set this up a few years back. So it's great to have you on board. We've got Miss Laura Oliveira, who's the founder and president of Grupo Levvo, and it's great to have you on board, Laura. And it's a very interesting group that you've got. I went on your website. It's interesting in terms of what you're doing and how you've managed to grow your activities. So we're delighted to hear from you. We've got Mr. Joseph Nganga, who's at the Rockefeller Foundation. We haven't had a chance to speak, Joseph, but I know that the Rockefeller does some extraordinary work across the continent, both in terms of cities not just in Africa, but across around the world. So it'll be interesting to take your take on in terms of powering cities, but also powering rural areas. And last but not least, we've got a good and long-standing friend of mine, Mr. NJ Ayuk, who's founder of Centurion Law Group, but he's also the chair of the African Energy, or president of the African Energy Chamber. And he's outspoken in terms of, I should say, policy and how to attract investment into the energy sector. So I wish I could share a screen with all of you, but maybe what we can make available is a report that we produced last year for the Africa Energy Forum. But I was just looking at some stats, and I've got some stats in front of me. And it's interesting that gas actually overtook coal in African electricity generation back in, I think, 2015 or 16. So gas is actually the main provider of energy around the continent. And it's also, I was also interested, I was surprised actually to see that hydro, in terms of sustainable and renewable power, hydro is actually a dominant force, accounting for over 70% of renewables. Then it's followed by wind, depending on how you account for solar, but it's followed by wind and solar, each having about 40%. So wind is 40, solar is at 37%. So, but what we do know is that you can't industrialize without energy. And unfortunately, we haven't yet solved the energy conundrum. There's too many people still without energy, and the majority of these people are still on the African continent. So it's a slight indictment in terms of our governments to some extent, and for us not getting our act together. So, and it's not just about power generation, as hopefully we'll get to know, but it's also about the utilities. It's also about distribution and the grid network. Anyway, so that's enough from me. I'm not the expert. You are, and my panelists are. So maybe we'll start with Glenn, if I may call you all by your first names. So. Is it fair to be asking developing countries to industrialize using renewables only, or are we looking at the right energy mix, and it will involve coal in some countries, and I believe South Africa's 90+% of its power generation is from coal. So Glenn, what can we expect in terms of making energy accessible and affordable, and in terms of the energy mix?
Thank you very much, Omar, for that introduction, and it's a pleasure to be joining you from Vienna, Austria today. As Omar noted, Sustainable Energy for All is the only international organization that's focused on SDG 7. We began as a UN initiative and now are outside the UN. But still very much focused on SDG 7 on issues of access. And I appreciate the question, Omar, because it's one that we are dealing with more and more as we support and are involved with the COP26 Energy Transition Campaign, which is being led by the COP26 presidency UK government. And so we've been engaging with many countries on their energy transitions and what it means to be ambitious. And one of the first points to note is what many countries are interested in is what it takes to develop. And so if that is not addressed immediately, then it's a very short conversation. There needs to be a way for the global community to engage with different countries on the needs of those particular countries. And the issue of industrialization I think is a perfect one. But I think if I can give a slight twist to that question, I think the issue is what will it take for many of these developing countries to be competitive in a green economy? And what comes to mind is a quote that many of you may know, which is that the Stone Age did not end because people ran out of stones. It ended because there was a better idea. And this is where we stand right now in terms of energy. It's very telling. The person who shared that quote was Minister for Oil of Saudi Arabia. And he recognized at one point, doesn't matter how much oil we have, things will move on. And things will move on to renewable. So that, I think, is an important message in terms of how to be more competitive in a green economy. And the second point, and I'll leave it with this second point, Omar, is if we look at the integration and interconnectedness of our global trade, we need to start anticipating competitiveness in a truly green economy. There are many countries that we're working with now on this energy transition campaign who are anticipating the carbon border adjustment mechanism that the EU is looking to put into place, where higher tariffs will be levied on products that are imported into the EU from countries if they're not climate ambitious enough. And so this is a reality. This is where leading countries will start to gravitate towards, if anything, for the improvement of their economy. It is about development. It is about getting economies moving. And there's a way to do that while being green as well. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thanks, Glenn. Generally, I have follow-up questions, but I will do. But I'll go to NJ, actually, if you don't mind. There's no real order in terms of the speakers, but I'll go to NJ to react on that. NJ, you're president of the Africa Energy Chamber. You've advised a lot of oil and gas companies across the continent. You're advising a lot of ministries of hydrocarbons across the continent. And I'm seeing that now that gas to power is massive across many countries. And but you've spoken about this energy transition, and Glenn's saying that we need to be competitive in the green economy ultimately, and we're going to be curtailed if that's not the case by, or hampered, should I say, by international regulation, saying that okay, you're not green, we won't purchase your products, you won't be able to trade with us. So what's your take here in terms of the energy transition, and what are your timelines, would you say, and that we need to look at from an African perspective?
Well, thank you so much, and it's great to be here with Sister Laura. It's great to be with Glenn and Joseph, and you get all these smart people on the same panel than little old me. So I think I am blessed. But Omar, I think you're very humble when you talk about the work you do. For you and your organization for more than half a century have made African voices and African issues at the central core of whatever you do and around the world. So it's an honor to salute that which you do. I think Glenn has put up some very important points. But I think before we jump into this, we have to first take into consideration that what works in London doesn't work in Lagos. What works in Norway doesn't work in Nairobi. And the issue of energy transition, I think we have to have a balanced approach on how we do that. And this is not any issue against climate change. I think anybody who disputes the science or the validity of climate change is a fool. If they come to and they're talking to you in that room, you walk out of the room because you shouldn't have that conversation. I think climate change is real. We have to get there. And I think even the energy industry has a lot of work to do. But we have to face facts. We're dealing in a continent like Africa, where energy poverty is real. When you are in Vienna, you don't understand what it means to go for a night without any kind of power, or if you're in New York, or if you are in maybe even some bigger cities in around the world. But the question which a lot of people, African governments, and everyday Africans are asking is, why should we have to pay reparations to people who took our resources and then use those resources to develop their countries? And then right now, it looks like we are going to be taxed. And I think Glenn said it very well with the tariffs that they're talking about. If you're going to put tariffs on that, we've not even industrialized. But then if we even try to industrialize with fossil fuels, you're going to put tariffs because we're not ambitious enough and we don't have that enough. That, I think, is the unfairness that most people in not just Africa, but a lot of third world countries, because again, this whole dialogue looks like policies are being crafted, dictated, and really driven to Africa that really hurts. Now, to your question on that, we have, Africa has a great chance to set up some ambitious timelines on energy transition. That is an advantage. But the question is that how are we going to pay for it? How are we going to meet those timelines? You're taking, if you look at the US, Lyndon Baines Johnson, when he discussed about helping on affirmative action in the United States, he said, you don't take somebody who's been preparing to run a race for about 20 to 30 years, and then you get somebody who's just preparing to get on that race, and then you get them and say, oh, you just started to run this race today, let's put you on the same place, and you guys are going to train together. Our timelines in Africa would fall back. We don't want to put Africa in a position where Africa is going to be seeking exemptions. Africa is going to be seeking waivers or set aside. We want to leapfrog to the future. There is an advantage for us. We want to leapfrog to the future, but the debate right now and the policies that have been put out there, it sets Africa behind even further. and whether it comes to manufacturing, whether it comes to industrialization. And one other thing you need to be very careful with this, which I think a lot of governments are grappling with, and African business is grappling with, is that we are going to be put in a position that we will not be able to cope. Manufacturing of most of the renewables, nothing in the policies that is coming out is showing that manufacturing will be made in Africa. So the switch on everything is going to be done in Western countries, and Africa would have the switch turned on and off on Africa every time they want. We don't see, in a continent with so many young people, we don't see anything coming on how it's going to really drive us to be competitive. But also we also understand that we have an obligation, and this is not and should not be another kind of foreign aid. It should not be another kind of aid, because the aid narrative of what they always say, and we'll give you this, we'll give you some lands. We do not just need power that will give us some solar flashlights so we can see at night, even though 650 million people are in the dark. We want power that will drive our economies, will drive us to build, to have roads, to have jobs, and create for the future. So our timelines, to be honest with you, Africa is going to set back. But we have a big advantage, and I'll end with this. We have not emitted as much carbon emissions as Europe. We have not emitted as much carbon emissions as China. We have not emitted as much as the United States. So we have a chance to still do better, but they also have to be very careful to not penalize the continent that has lost the most, has been abused the most, and then use this to say, now we are going to abuse you the most on this. Thank you.
Okay, NJ, quite controversial there. But in terms of the energy mix, so what, we're seeing quite a lot of, we're seeing substantial investments in solar, in hydro, in gas to power. And I think that gas is seen as relatively clean, or as cleaner than coal anyway. So, but I mean, in terms of the energy mix, what are you, what are you saying? You're saying that oil and gas is still going to be dominant. Coal is still going to be used for the next 10, 15 years. Is that what you're saying?
Yes and no. We have to, Glenn was right. The Stone Age didn't end because of a lack of stones. We have to transition. We have to move. We have to embrace the future, and we have to embrace it fast. Africa is blessed with one thing. When you have 650 million people without access to power, it's not oil, it's not a religion. If you can use solar to power our economies, welcome, let's do it. If you can use wind to power economies, welcome, let's do it. But we have something right now that works for us. I just came back from Mozambique yesterday, where my condolences goes to the brothers up there in Cabo Delgado who witnessing a terrorist attack from ISIS. But this is what is going to happen. Mozambique, for example, is going to be the third largest producer of gas around in the world. Third largest producers after Russia and Qatar. And then you look at the big, massive gas finds in Senegal that are still to be developed, and Nigeria, which is a sad case of what they've done with their gas, they're flaring it. So we do see, I think the African strategy that you're going to see around Africa is moving away from oil, but using gas as that bridge fuel to see that. South Africa needs tremendous amount of gas because, of course, they have to move away from coal. Of course, it's bad for the environment. But then do not cut us off from something that can really work, whether it is having gas that can be a bridge fuel while we bring in the all renewable energies to drive us there. But if right now you penalize, and I think big controversial issue we're facing right now, where we are having blockades and there's divestments campaigns, just like you found during the anti-apartheid movement, said, do not invest in gas, which is cleaner and better. Do not invest in it and everything. So that is the problem, and we're going to move in that. Africa needs a complete energy mix. Everything that works and that gets us going, it needs to be there. But do not block us from doing that transition, and let's do that transition respectfully, and let's have a balanced discussion. And we should have African voices in the room that really help so that we all can meet our climate goals together.
Glenn, I'm going to come back to you later, and you can respond a bit to what NJ has said. But I'm going to go to Laura, if that's all right. Laura, you're on mute, so you have to unmute yourself. But Laura, I went on your website, and with my team, we said, "Wow, what an extraordinary company! You ran one of the biggest franchises from McDonald's in the country, and then you're in renewable energy. So it's very different industries, but we love that." So we want to know actually how you grew your renewables business, how your renewables business is doing, so how you grew the model, and also the role of government ultimately to grow a business like yours. Were the government supportive in terms of incentives, et cetera, et cetera?
Okay. Hello, good afternoon. I don't know the times exactly we are, but today I'm talking about my case. I am a franchisee for McDonald's more 24 years approximately, and my role is inspire the other. I am an entrepreneur, and I try to do my best. Sometimes it's not easy because you need to do what is different. And then when you are McDonald's franchising, I'm looking for what is better for the planet and what I can do for help. And then in McDonald's restaurants, your energy, electric energy, it's so high. And then I'm looking for alternative to do the transition and to do something for can help in the planet and change my transition for a high electric energy for the clean energy. Then for 2 years approximately, I try to understand everything about the renewable energy and clean and what I can to do. In the first moment in Brazil, this subject, it's very new. Nobody knows, understand and say, I don't know, if this is a good for the change money back, this is good or not. And then the expensive, but I don't know exactly. Then I'm looking for some people that can understand and help me, and looking for some low interest rate, and if the government can help you or not. In Brazil, there are a lot of rules and criteria so specific for you to do a plant for the power plant and the photovoltaic. And then I'm looking for something about the garbage in the first moment and try to understand what I need to do. But there are a lot of situations. There are good advantages, but some disadvantage. And then I say, no, it's not this that I want. And after this, I'm looking for about the solar photovoltaic and try to understand everything, the investment, the help the government or not, or what the McDonald's thinking about this, and what I can do or not. This is a big challenge, but I try to do everything is completely right, and then I say, I think it's possible. It's not easy, but it's possible. Then the first moment I convinced the McDonald's that it's possible because I am a franchisee and I need the authorization, the corporate. And then this is a little difficult because nobody knows this before. And then I'm the first one. Well, 2 years and I'm looking for everything. And the government, there is some lines for the load. And then I'm looking for some low interest rate. I understand the international regulation because here in Brazil, there is ANEEL for you to follow after everything. In Brasilia, the name of the energy is SEBI. And I'm looking for the first step. It's presentation, my plan for the SEBI. SEB is an official regulation for energy. And then everything is okay. In 8 months, I building my plan, my power plan. It's approximately 5,000 panels, approximately 2,300 Minha Casa Minha Vida. The name in Portuguese, it's a small residence for poor people, something like that. And then the capacity for the power plant for month, it's approximately, I can support energy for 2,300 residents. Small residence, but it's very nice because I am a medium corporate. I'm not a big company, I'm medium. I have 500 employees, and I try in my restaurants change the mindset for the small actions, for turn off the lights when you don't use this room, turn off the air conditioner, some small actions for you try to change the mindset for my employee, for everybody worry about the planet and try to do something with water. And then this is 5-10 years ago, I began to do these things. And then I say, now I need to do a big plan. And then this is approximately what I do. And in almost 2 years, my power plant is working. It's very enthusiastic because you have 3 employees and the son, it's my major employee, the son, can do a good job. In almost 2 years, we have 1,500 forest. Like if I can plant almost 2,000 trees. This is very nice because you stop to put the CO2 gas in the planet. And I think it's good. For the corporate McDonald's in Brazil, he's really surprised because it's a big initiative. And then it's very nice for the system and for the visibility. And now I do some shorts and finalists with this, try to inspire the other people to do the same thing that I can do. I think it's this.
Fantastic. So if I understand correctly, you've got an off-grid solution, correct? So you've got your own power plant that supplies energy to both your McDonald's stores and also some residents around there.
Yes, what I do, I give this example just for you have an idea what's the capacity. But my power plant just for support my restaurants. I have 7 restaurants and 10 ice cream kiosks. And this is my number of my business. And then it's a specific for just for myself. And then I get with this, it's low cost, and then it's good for the financial, for the corporate, for my it's very nice because you can save the money, you can clean, you can use it, you can use renewable and clean energy. Then if you realize it, everything in ESG, every company today thinks with the environment, social, and corporate governance. And then I'm here and I do that approximately 3 years. And I thinking about the planet, I think about the environment, and then I think it's a good situation. It's a good business. It's good for save the money. You can help the planet, and then I think it's very advantageous. In my opinion, this panel like this, it's try to do something with a connect the government, Chamber of Commerce, for you try to thinking about an alternative to with the government, for try to do something for 2 points. One, for try to change the transition energy for the poor people, because it's very nice for the government to do that. And the other one, you incentivize the big corporation, change your energy for the renewable and clean energy. I think this is my role now. I try to do this because there are advantages so many. And then I think it's for quality, the air for everybody. This is very interesting too, because you can better health and better your financial situation, and you can do something for the planet. I think it's very fantastic. I'm enthusiastic. I'm listening to Ayuk to talking. I agree with him. We need to do something for the people, change your mindset and do something.
Fantastic. Thank you, Laura. Look, Joseph, this is all music to your ears, I take it. And I know that the Rockefeller Foundation is involved in agriculture and the industrialization of the agricultural sector as well. And I know that off-grid and mini-grid solutions is something that the agricultural sector has been looking at. I know that you're also you've got your cities index and about transforming cities and ensuring that these cities can also be lit. Tell us a little bit about some of the interesting projects that you've been involved in and solutions that we can scale up in terms of emerging markets, but at the African continent that you know so well, especially in terms of making energy accessible, affordable, but ultimately clean as well.
Thank you very much, Obi, and thank you to the organizers for having me as a panelist on this, and delighted to hear from NJ. It's really difficult to follow on what you said. A lot of it is true, and delighted that we have you as a champion for the continent. Laura, fascinating story on the renewable application for your stores and your franchise. And I really liked the phrase that the son is one of your employees. I like that. If it's okay, right, I'll use it quite often. Glenn, good to see you. SEforALL and the foundation are really good partners on several different fronts. So always good to be on a panel with SEforALL. Obi, to your questions. One, let's frame the challenge. 650 million people, as NJ mentioned, a lot of them in rural areas, a lot of them low income, a lot of them will consume very little power. So if you think about it from an industry perspective, it is challenging from an economics perspective, from an infrastructure perspective, and you can compare it to other sectors. So for example, mobile phones are now ubiquitous across the continent because they don't require heavy capital, or they do require, but not to the same level as putting wires to every household. And then you look at the urban centers, and what's fortunate and unfortunate at the same time is in some of the countries, generation is at a level where utilities are struggling because of overcapacity, which is an oxymoron given that you're talking 10, 20, 30% electrification. But anyway, so you have a situation where the national utilities that serve the urban centers are facing a challenge of too much power without enough customers, which in itself is a recipe for disaster. And then you have rural areas where it's really difficult to get electrification in a way that is viable and sustainable from an economics perspective. So I'm not sure who had mentioned earlier that this was an easy problem. No, it's not. It's the opposite is actually true. It's quite a complex problem, and it requires a number of interventions. And so we at the foundation view it in a very clear way as extremely important that we think of it in a holistic way. So not only looking at generation, not only looking at distribution, not only looking at mini grids, not only looking at the demand side, productive use side of things, but thinking of it all holistically and then saying, if we're going to electrify 650 million Africans in a sustainable way, in a way that allows for economic growth. And when we talk about economic growth, if you look at countries that have industrialized, they have significant per capita consumption. And so our near-term ambitions are to get communities to 300 kilowatt hour per capita consumption in a climate smart way. And that will drive industrialization, it will drive job creation, as Glenn mentioned, but it will do so in a very climate responsible way. So from all that, what I would like to say is that the foundation, we are looking at it in 4 key ways. One is, how do we expand generation and drive supply side, whether it's on the mini grid side, whether it's on the utility side. 2, how do we drive demand so that there is job creation, there is economic growth, but also these utilities are sustainable, because without adequate demand, they won't be sustainable. If they're not sustainable, they will not be able to continue providing power. We do this with a very clear view on being climate smart. Climate smart is not about picking one or the other, it's about allowing for a clear understanding of what the different generation sources, how they impact the climate and the economics of those generation sources, and what each country's options are, because in some countries solar makes most sense, in other countries hydro makes most sense. And then the 4th part is we share this information, our learnings, our experiences, our collaborations, our investments in the various companies that are playing in the field, are all yielding lessons that can be applied elsewhere by others. And so leveraging that experience, those partnerships, to really scale this to a level where we're addressing a significant global challenge. Thank you, Obi.
Okay, so what have you seen that's worked? I mean, you talk about increasing generation, but you also talked about actually, you need to increase demand, because ultimately the utilities are more or less guaranteed by the state in terms of the power generators, but they're left with a hefty bill because they're not managing to on-sell this power that's generated. And we've seen this in Ghana, I believe, whereby the Ghanaian government guaranteed so much energy purchases, but ultimately they're not being able to use all the energy that's being produced, and as a result, they're facing this massive bill. But what have you seen that's actually worked? That's climate responsible, climate smart, as you call it, and sustainable, both from a business perspective, but also from an energy perspective.
So what I've seen work in some cases, and we have been at this for more than 10 years as a foundation, and also in my previous roles. What we've seen work is a holistic look at the situation. So if you address supply and you ignore demand, you have a challenge. If you address policy, but you don't address the investments into private companies, then you have a challenge. So what works is a comprehensive, holistic look at this in a very contextual way. So do not take what has worked in Uganda and apply it to Nigeria. Every country is different, its parameters are different. So it's thinking in a holistic way about the sector, defining interventions that address multiple issues. As I say, this is a complex challenge, and being very contextual in how you do that. One example I would give from the generation side is Uganda and KFW's intervention there with the Get Fit program. It was not only policy intervention, it was also tariff intervention, it was also private sector engagement intervention, investable climate intervention. It was ensuring that UETCL could handle the bankable PPAs. It was ensuring that lenders were comfortable with the power purchase agreements, bankability, and so on. So what works is holistic view of the challenge and clearly defined targeted interventions specific to that particular market.
Excellent. Glenn, I'm going to come back to you. You're on mute, by the way, but I'm going to come back to you. Okay, so a lot has been said. We've discussed the timeframes in terms of the energy transition. We've discussed penalizing emerging markets if they don't adhere to certain standards. We've also talked about funding to some extent. How do you fund or how do you assist the funding of investments in climate smart or climate responsible projects? And maybe they make economic sense in any case. And a lot of things in terms of utilities, government incentives, etc., etc. But maybe you want to address the first one, which is what NJ said in terms of the energy transition, and how do you see it being fair ultimately? I think we all understand that it makes sense. Africa is disproportionately impacted by climate change in terms of agricultural production, droughts, tropical cyclones, etc., etc. So we know that climate change has a cost. But ultimately, how do we manage this energy transition? And so what's the role of government there? And what's the role of the international community, I suppose?
Thanks, Omar, for that list of questions. Please give me a steer if you'd like me to hit some of the others as well. On energy transition, one of the discussions that I think is most helpful right now is about the just transition and how the just transition will be different in different countries. This is something that's extremely current. There are many governments that are looking closely at this and recognizing, that what works in Northern Europe is not going to work in Southeast Asia, may not work in Central America, and may not work in Sub-Saharan Africa. So there is an opening there to be able to start thinking about what does that just transition look like. The second, I think, important point on energy transition is that we recognize SEforALL has been advancing in many moments the fact that to get to net zero by 2050, we need to get to universal access to energy by 2030. And there's no way to get to an energy transition without being able to hit those targets of universal access to energy by 2030. And I would like to just expand a bit on what that access to energy reflects or requires. So oftentimes we talk about electricity. Clearly there's an SDG target, SDG 7 target for clean cooking, which is critical to address. But there are also cooling needs, there are also heating needs, and one energy need that's become even more relevant over the past year has been having sufficient energy and appliances, applications to access communications and internet. And so if we can start looking at energy needs as this collection of lighting, clean cooking, cooling, heating, and communications, then I think we have a chance of better depicting or better characterizing where it is that we need to focus our efforts. That is what is being discussed in terms of energy poverty, and how we reach those different gaps is going to be extremely important. I guess just to make one final comment and to build on what Joseph was saying, I think one of the really good examples is what Kenya has been doing over the past 15, 20 years, putting in, its reforms, recognizing the importance of off-grid, not just on-grid, getting financing to very ambitious off-grid projects, which have been extremely helpful, developing their renewables, and obviously harnessing a lot of geothermal. Kenya's at a point where it's generating so much energy, it needs to be able to use that energy and put it on an energy market. And that's the next step, in my view, in terms of how to help anticipate what's happening in different parts of Africa. There's the East Africa Power Pool, Southern African Power Pool, West Africa Power Pool. This will be a keystone for getting those energy markets working. And so being able to share and distribute the right amounts of energy to the different needs across a multi-country platform. So Kenya, I think, is a really good story to think about in terms of good examples of when things all the pieces can start to fall together.
Fantastic. And in terms of the energy space, are there innovations that give you reason for hope in terms of developments? I mean, we know that the cost of solar, for example, has gone down over tenfold in the past 15 years or so. But what gets you excited?
It's a very good question. And I would say things have changed dramatically over the past 6 months for the better. And it is a very exciting moment to think about what are the opportunities. On the global stage, we have different public commitments from governments and from major emitters, the EU, China, Korea, Japan, which have been very helpful. Now, clearly, many of us hope that the US will follow suit and also make an important commitment. But I think what's even more encouraging is to see how the private sector is starting to really put its innovative power behind the green economy. And so we've seen now multiple car manufacturers fixing targets of when they will phase out the combustible engine. We can start to imagine that being a thing of the past. We're also seeing hard to abate sectors such as maritime transport to start to innovate in terms of how they can be a bit more sustainable with their energy uses. So with that type of impetus from the private sector, I think it's a very exciting moment to be in, and I think the next several years will lead to a different landscape of options 5-10 years from now.
Fantastic. NJ, you're speaking to investors across the continent in the energy space, especially in the oil and gas space. I mean, oil and gas, ultimately, a lot of these companies, or if not all of them, have now got a net zero target embedded within their strategy. I mean, they need it to attract international capital and continued investment and funding, be it raising bonds on the international markets, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll start with this question. Ultimately, I'll start with one question, and I'll get to something a little bit different. But the first question I'll start off with is, what are you hearing from these international investors, the BPs of this world, the Enies of this world? I know that you're involved in Senegal, and there's a massive investment, as you said, in oil and gas across Senegal, Mauritania. So what are they saying to you, and what's their strategy ultimately in terms of this transition, and how they can contribute to the development of energy production across the continent?
I think the good news for about this is that the oil companies are no longer going to be oil companies. They're going to be energy companies. These companies are free market driven. They want to make money, and producing energy and exploring for energy is going to be what drives the future. So you're seeing Total right now basically change its name to Total Energies. You're seeing Statoil right now is called Equinor. You're seeing, but again, let's be very careful. I think we have to be very serious about energy transition and move away from the optics. So part of what has to happen is that the energy companies around Africa do understand that the public is going to hold them accountable. So it's not just the name change and the optics, but now look at what you're doing. Some of them are dropping some of the key oil and gas assets and moving towards gas assets and moving towards renewable assets and finding different ways and exploring different things. They're also looking at how to produce low carbon LNG, which I think that is massive technology that we have to really appreciate, and given that the big amounts of money that they have, it can be something that could be revolutionary and it could really help the market. But I think even more bigger than that, most of the energy companies are trying to deal with that and mandating some of the service companies that walk around with them work with them as their contractors to mandate to see some changes. But the big issue here is that everybody has to be held accountable and has to buy into the trust of the public to really meet these mandates. And I think Glenn was right when he talked about a lot has changed over the last 6 months with new technologies and everything. But I would tell Glenn that there continues to be a lot of skepticism. I think maybe a lot has changed in Europe and America, hoping that America comes on board in the Paris Accords. But in Africa, there continues to be some skepticism. I talk to people every day. But one of the key things of that skepticism, Glenn, that you see with a lot has changed is that we have something called COVID-19. And when COVID-19 break out, these same people in Africa that you're telling to join you to meet these climate goals. You can't even give them vaccines. You can't even take care of them, because when you have your vaccines, you take care of your own. And then tomorrow you come back to these same people and you tell them that you need to trust me on climate change. I'm with you. The beautiful thing about our continent is that we have a very youthful population. This population, we have to take care of them so that you don't have to cross the Mediterranean looking for greener shores in Europe or dying in the Mediterranean. So we want more lawyers, more women coming out of this and all these mandates. But Glenn, when we don't have these same people who are telling us that drop your natural resources, we are bringing you these new things that will be good for you. We have hope. We have the white knight coming for you, and we have all of this. But then you can't give grandma and grandpa a COVID vaccine because you say, I got to take care of my people first. Is that what the same approach on energy transition? Because that's what the African street is thinking of. That's what the African street is saying. That's what the African street is believing, and that is something that we have to churn this skeptic population. The only thing that has saved Africa, is we have a youthful population, a lot of them under 26 or under 30. They even become COVID positive and they become asymptomatic. Very young, they get up out there, they have not been hit. But if this continent got hit like Europe or America, Africans would have perished. So we have a messaging thing to really deal with right now with a population that is already very skeptical. And I think we in the climate energy transition community should learn from how Africa was abandoned and neglected on COVID vaccines and correct that. We should look at the mirror. Like I always say, mirrors are not to reflect what we see. They are to correct what we see. So COVID should be a big mirror for us to not be mirror images, and let us correct what we see with energy transition and not get it wrong, especially when it comes to Africa.
Okay, I'm going to give Glenn the right to reply in a second. But don't you agree, NJ, that renewables are already taking place on the continent? We're seeing massive projects, solar projects in Morocco, in Egypt, in South Africa. So, I mean, our governments get it, and they're already living this energy transition. They understand it. We've got massive projects, as Glenn was saying, in Kenya. So it's not either or. It's we're already doing it. We understand it, and we're investing in it.
Omar, you're talking to the African Energy Chamber. We capitalists, we love free market. What do we get out of this? Money. Okay, so if renewables are going to bring us money, it's going to put a chicken in every pot, it's going to give us everything, why not? We have 650 million people who don't have any kind of access. Do you think we have time to choose? We don't get into these ideological games in the West of whether this is bad or this is good. We welcome everything. We have so much problem, we don't have time to slice and dice this. If the future is going to be renewables, which I believe it is going to be renewables, we should embrace it. But here is the warning which we have. And now this is not Glenn's problems, and this is not Joseph's problem. This is not Laura's problem. This is my problem, because I have to get my leaders in Africa to do what Glenn said has been done in Kenya. We need more Uhuru Kenyatta's. We need more Macky Salls to start building that energy mix. We have to create an enabling environment, ensuring good governance, ensuring that we can create an environment that lets more Lauras to come out of Africa. More young people, instead of crossing the Mediterranean, they can set up businesses and grow and build something, connecting with their brothers and sisters out of Brazil, learning from those experiences and saying, let us build, let us address these issues. And you're talking about, Glenn is talking about what we've seen the last 6 months. Imagine if we get young Africans solving our energy crisis for these 600 million people with solar, with wind turbines, and building small businesses. What do I see? I see jobs and I see everything. But I'm not just interested in seeing that we have one benevolent leader comes in and create a group of incentives so that one company benefits and does a big solar project. No, I want an environment, because a free markets are important, but an enabling environment that is structured gives a room for us to have more young people busting up from Cape Town to Cairo, from Nairobi to Dakar, and really driving that African chorus so that that African sun will come out. Something that most people call it Africa, I call it home. I want this to rise up here, because if we beat this energy crisis in Africa, we become part of the world, solving the world's problems and really raising our people up, but with entrepreneurship, with jobs and everything. But that's my job. That is part of my generations, to contribute to creating an enabling environment where a young man can create a job can create a solar company or wind company and really do this work without the chance of corruption, the respect for the sanity of contracts. We are blessed right now. We have the free trade agreement that is going to bring 1 billion people together, and we can trade among ourselves. So we also have some work to do in Africa. It's not Glenn's job. The only thing we ask Glenn is that don't treat this as another foreign aid, because your foreign aid has not worked. It has failed. It is really bad. And use this to see it as build capacity so that we, government and public officials, can be able to deal with the right kind of regulatory, legislative framework so that this can work. Have programs, if you want to do your foreign aid, have programs to spur entrepreneurships. Don't put tariffs and penalize African products. Open up the market so we all can compete. And I tell you something, if you give these young Africans a chance to compete and the right kind of framework, you will be shocked by what you can do. Because I believe in these young people. We need to give them a chance. They are going to shock the world if we do that. But we should not see them as an aid basket. We should not see them as people that have to just wait out there to take. It's wrong, and we need to empower people from bottom up.
Excellent. Okay, I'm going to very quickly give the right to reply to Glenn there. I don't think Glenn has done anything to do with the vaccines, by the way. Whoever's watching, Glenn is a nice chap. He's not stopping any vaccines from getting anywhere. And it's more our problem in terms of not being able to manufacture vaccine on the continent. Anyway, but Glenn, I think the message that that NJ is trying to put across is that actually we've got an urgent need. We know we've got 650 million people who aren't getting access to electricity, and we need to use whatever resources we have in the short term, at least, as we manage this transition to climate smart and sustainable solutions.
Yes, and to be honest, I mean, NJ touched on so many things. I'd be hard pressed to answer, all of them. But let me maybe just make one point, which is when I moved from Lima, Peru to Nairobi, Kenya, where I lived for 6 years, NJ, I was amazed at what we were able to use, which was something called M-Pesa. And the fact that, here, and, we're talking about South-South, Peru, a very good neighbor of Brazil, and we didn't have this in South America. And so the fact that there can be this type of innovation using digital platforms is not something we've touched on explicitly in this conversation, but it's a huge advantage. And it's that creativity that, and where I will agree with what you said, NJ, where there needs to be an enabling environment to be able to do this. There needs to be the support to be able to trigger, to catalyze, to unleash. There's tremendous innovation and entrepreneurial spirit in Nigeria. I know very well, because I'm sure, as all of you know, the head of SEforALL is Damilola Gumbi, Nigerian former managing director of the largest rural electrification program in Africa. So just to clarify in particular for the audience, Sustainable Energy for All is very much focused on increasing access, on making sure that we are being able to provide the perspective and the voice in the different international fora that we participate in on behalf of African countries. So this is an extremely important point for the organization, for Sustainable Energy for All. And Damilola has been very pivotal at doing this. So I welcome the ideas from my colleague on the panel. But yes, we are very much focused on many of the same things, perhaps not in the same style, but certainly with similar substance.
Fantastic. Maybe we'll talk about rural electrification in a bit. Maybe I'll go to Joseph before I go to Laura. So Joseph, I mean, we spoke about innovation, and it's a fascinating topic. I mean, we've seen some solutions. I don't know whether they're the right solutions, but M-Copper, and ultimately, what's enabled M-Copper, as Glenn has insinuated, is the fact that you are able to make those, I don't want to call them micropayment, but at least mobile payments from rural areas. And so innovation has enabled access to some electricity, not enough to run an industrial plant, but enough to run electricity for a small family. But what's the role of innovation? And are we seeing enough innovation, or how do we attract more capital, VC funding or other funding, into innovation in the electricity space?
Thank you very much. Innovation and regulated industry don't usually show up on the same sentence. And the electricity sector in particular, which is our focus, heavily regulated. However, we are seeing some interesting innovations across the hardware side, which means everything from the generation technology, whether it's solar panels, the inverters, and the balance of system that are driving down cost and improving efficiencies. We are seeing innovations on the demand side. So CLASP, for example, are running some tests for innovative cook stoves, pressure cook stoves that use 100 watts of power and could work on a mini grid very efficiently, on a family that's on a mini grid very efficiently, as opposed to what you would see in a typical household, which is 1 kilowatt, and therefore significantly higher power requirements and costs for cooking a meal. We are also seeing innovation in terms of business models. So whether it's the mini grid business or it's an aggregation, pooled procurement of equipment so that you lower the cost of and purchase of equipment. So there's also innovation on the business model side. And then we are seeing some very exciting innovations, again, on the demand side, but a bit out there. One of them is electric mobility. So we all have heard of Tesla, and we've heard of electric vehicles, but we're seeing a lot of interesting activities around two-wheelers, three-wheelers, which are ubiquitous in rural areas, that are being adapted from the Asian market to the African market, where you have rougher roads, heavier loads, and so on. UNEP, for example, is running a program on this topic. But we're also seeing, if we push that innovation conversation even further, and as Glenn mentioned, the innovation around mobile payments, to looking at how these stranded renewable energy assets that are not currently on the grid, or that could be an additional demand component in mini grids, such as data processing and hashing and so on, that also ensure, as NJ very strongly emphasizes, youth and employment and job creation that hopefully reduces the migration of young people to urban centers, or they're taking significantly high risks to cross the Mediterranean to look for opportunities in Europe. So there's a huge amount of innovation happening in this space, and needs to be properly targeted and financed. When you think about early stage businesses, you have founders who have great ideas, are extremely smart, but oftentimes they don't have the ecosystem support around them that would make their technologies and their ideas successful. And so interventions required need to include business ecosystem support to ensure that these budding innovations have the right financing, the right market understanding, the right HR processes to really scale. And so I would say we're seeing a lot of innovation, and where the interventions are required are around supporting that ecosystem to make this innovation successful. Equally important is right-sized and right-categorized money. A VC in a typical Western market wants to know what's your addressable market. And if it doesn't show immediate potential for millions or even billions of dollars in valuation in short order, then it doesn't fit into their way of thinking, because they invest in 100 businesses and they need one of them to succeed to pay for the losses of the other 99. A VC exercise on the continent, the individual addressable market, the potential evaluation of those businesses will be a lot smaller. And so the expectations, the models around VC investing on the continent needs to be right-sized for the businesses. Thanks, Obi.
Okay, fantastic. Look, we've got about 8 minutes. I'm going to go to Laura. So Laura, really, I mean, you decided to build your own power plant, and it was what we say here, enlightened self-interest. So you saw the opportunity, it made absolute sense to you, and obviously you're what I call a responsible citizen. So so you did what you thought was right. What's the role of government ultimately in terms of making sure that we transition to smart to smart solutions, and making and encouraging companies such as yours to invest more in renewables? The impression that we get from here, I don't trust the Western press, but the Western press obviously are quite critical of Bolsonaro and sort of climate skeptic, let's say, but someone who actually sees that we need to feed the people, as opposed to we need to focus on producing energy as opposed to looking at the most sustainable manner. But what's the role of government to encourage investment in energy, first of all, and sustainable energy?
Well, this is a difficult question, because in Brazil, and I think it looks like in Africa, if you worry about the politicians and politics and economies, you don't do anything. This is my personal opinion. Why? Because if you wait something, it's completely crazy. Because I use it crazy, because it's not complicated, it's crazy. If you see some news about yesterday, the Bolsonaro changed 6 ministries. 6 ministries. This is, in my opinion, it's crazy. I'm FGV, Fundação Getúlio Vargas. It's a very important university here in Brazil. I do a course about the consulting governance, about the corporate governance, because you need to understand the risk of the country, of company, because the politics. And then, in my personal opinion, you need to forget about why I do, what I think everybody need to do, what the big company, small company need to do. The first one, try to understand the regulation. If you follow the regulation, this is a good advantage because you do the right things. This is the point. And then for encourage the other companies to do the same thing, I try to participate about some corporate between, how can I say, I participate a lot of groups for the C-levels and try to talking about what exactly you need to do. First time, you need to try to understand your demanding for your corporation and try to find the best example you can do. For example, if you are in the Northeast, there is a solar incidence, but there is a aeolic the plant. It's a good alternative too. And then, in my opinion, you need to understand what your demand, and then you try to looking for the investment and have different banks that you need to the government help you. And then it's the good point. And then if you're looking for in the regulation and the banks and the low tax rate, this is a good way. The other point is very interesting. When you decided to share your demanding, for example, if you are in Pernambuco, the Northwest too, you try to do a small group, and try to do together. This is a good alternative. If you don't have a lot of money, you can take together and concessionária, how can I say it? You can say an agency and try to regulation 3 or 4 or 10 big companies to do together a power plant. This is a good suggestion too. In Brasilia, there are 3 or 4 groups did that, and it's very nice, good example. And then you try to find some people is the same interest that you and looking for together. This is good too, because the investments, it's a little high, but you can pay for a long term for the load. Then it's good too. And in my opinion, the other thing is you need to try to understand exactly you need. I like the Joseph speech because he says something very special. A lot of people want to do something, but what exactly these people doing? This is the point. You have a good idea, but you need the attitude. You need to do something very impacted the people, and you need to do something real, not on thinkingness. You need to do something real things. And then when you do, I think it's good. Why? In my case, a small company, but I believe and I did. This is good. It's a small action, but if everybody to do a small action, it's a good action. It's a big action. It's change for a big action. The point is, someone don't believe. This is the point. Or waiting for the government to do something, or waiting for the good opportunity time. In my opinion, this is good opportunity time never exists. You need to change what you believe. You need to do this. In this ESG, environment, social, this is very nice. In my case, in the middle of the pandemic, I began to do a startup. What is the startup? It's a digital wallet for social transformation and try to help to dealing with money, because everybody is scared. What happened? I don't know. Then you try to do innovation. You need to put your money in innovation, in renewable energy, and try to change the world. It's just words. But if you do with attitude, with you can do something for everybody. This is my opinion.
Fantastic, Lara. So yeah, of course, we need responsible leaders in the private sector to drive things. But you did mention that forget about the politicians. But yes, regulation is important ultimately. So look, NJ, we've got a few minutes, but in 1 minute, in terms of regulation, role of governments, and I want this to be super quick. So 1 minute. What is the advice that, or what is the one comment that you'd like to tell African leaders out there in terms of what they need to do to create the right incentives to invest, if at all?
I think you create incentives which are good, but focus on enabling environment. We've seen this from the oil and gas play around Africa. You can come in, you can give all the tax incentives, give everything and say you won't pay taxes, you won't do this, but then the small companies, investors still end up suffering because the environment itself, the courts are not working. It gets very difficult to set up a business. Customs are not working. The bureaucracy, it's there. So we need to look at the entire environment, and let's not look at this as talking to government. Let's not look at this as we helping investors. Let's look at this as we helping ourselves. Because when we make it easier for us, it becomes easier for investors. Because that is what it is. It's not us versus them. It is finding ways to make the environment better, because when we have this and we have better governance, it becomes better because young people and everybody can set up a business and go work. So incentives, yes, but environment, even better. When you have an enabling environment, you grow better, and then we can have the Africa we want, the Africa we deserve, and that place that most people call it Africa, I call it home.
Fantastic, thank you, NJ. Joseph, we can go to you. One interesting or one development that that you're particularly excited about, or that makes you confident in the future in this space?
I think it's the visibility. I think the rural electrification agenda, the electrification as not just a delivery of electrons, but also development of productive use that drives economic growth across the different countries and markets, whether it's urban or rural areas. I think that very focused conversation is what is most exciting, because in any complex scenario or situation or problem as this one we are trying to address, you need numerous interventions from different people with different angles and input. So making this a center of attention is, for me, the exciting part, because then it will drive the innovations, the financing, the policy framework that support finding the right solutions. Thanks.
Glenn, we're going to end it with you. I wanted to focus on one point, that of funding and finance. Would you say it's an issue, and is there a lot of capital that, or is the issue somewhere else? Sorry, is it an issue of capital or something else?
I think based on what we've been seeing and the way we've been interacting with other entities, it's not necessarily an issue of capital. It's an issue of the risks that need to be taken, and therefore the support that needs to be provided so that private capital can play a larger role. They're standing off stage right now just waiting for that opportunity. And those countries that can provide those opportunities will be the first to cross the finish line and attract that capital that's really eager to participate in this project. And my final point, Omar, if you'll allow, is the African Continental Free Trade Area. I think it's a dynamite vision. It's something that has the potential of really moving everyone in the same direction. And I think this is what a lot of private capital are also looking at with expectation.
Thank you, Glenn. Great positive note to end on. I'll pass it back to the studio. in Brazil. So, Prof, you can take it from here. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you very much for your time today. Great to speak to you all.